So Jeff and Paul, thanks a lot for your time. Tell us in a few sentences what Docent Health is.
Absolutely. We are helping health systems design and implement compelling experiences that they can offer to their patients as they go through a clinical journey. And those experiences that we're able to design and implement are both experiences that we can offer digitally and human interaction. Our belief is that health systems, I think, are interestingly now focused on how do they bring some humanity back into healthcare. There's been a lot of digitization of electronic medical record, but our belief, and a lot of the health systems and pioneers like Intermountain, I think, are the leading of this, are interested in how do they provide a more human connection to their patients as they go through their journey.
So the premise is that it has indeed gone too technological. Is that the downside of technology implementation in healthcare?
I think it's one of the downsides. There's a lot of pluses to what we've been able to achieve with digitization of electronic medical record, a lot of data, a lot of science now that's been brought to an area. But one of the opportunities for improvement is how do we personalize the experience for a patient instead of the experiences we're able to offer to patients being sort of one size fits all. Being able to really understand the preferences of the patient and then customize an experience that's relevant to them. And if you think about our interaction as consumers in other industries, we've got used to that. When we go into retail or entertainment or hospitality, we expect a compelling experience, and we expect it to be personalized to my preferences. And yet when we've been in the healthcare journey, we've suspended a lot of that belief.
Yeah.
And we've just gone along with the masses. And I think now as consumers with more choice, more power, we're paying more for our healthcare than we've ever done before. We have a different set of expectations about what we want from our healthcare providers.
Yeah. So at Intermountain Healthcare, as you gentlemen well know, we've focused on clinical outcomes and on cost reduction, right? And in fact, we've built up whole systems, clinical programs and whole systems on those two elements. The focus on patient engagement and patient experience is now coming on, but hasn't historically been part of our DNA, what we do. So talk to us about that intersection between the clinical excellence and outcomes and now patient engagement and excellence there.
Yeah, I think there's an opportunity to bring that same level of data-driven, evidence-based care to the experience side of the equation with the rigor and the science on how to design an experience journey that's really human-centric through the lens of the patient. Apply the same ethic that you've built on the clinical side of the house for the patient journey. So I do think organizations like Intermountain, who have the assets that they've been able to execute so successfully to improve outcomes and to drive down cost, are pretty well advantaged in extending that same musculature to the patient experience side of the house.
Walk us through the steps that you would take, because the steps on the clinical side are pretty well defined, how to stay evidence-based. What are they on the patient experience side?
Yeah, I think you have to start with understanding who your patients or who your customers are and where they're coming from. So a lot of organizations are spending time meeting with the patients in their home and getting a better understanding of what their expectations are in their healthcare journey. What's the context from which they're coming from? Have they had positive or negative experiences in the past? What are some of the social determinants that might impact their clinical journey along the way? So really investing in understanding the patient as both a customer and as a human being, and then starting to draw some inferences. Are there natural segments that we can find in our markets to help us better create a healthcare journey, an experience journey that best meets their expectations?
And I think, just to add to that, Craig, if you think about the evolution over the last 30 years of clinical pathways, over time we've iterated. It hasn't been a static thing. You've used data, we've used evidence to figure out what are the best ways to treat particular disease states. And if you look at how you treat today a total knee replacement versus 25 years ago, it's very different.
Yeah.
There's a lot of data we've been capturing to figure out what are the best outcomes that can be achieved from both the cost and a quality perspective. Well, you can apply the same logic to experience. If we capture data about these journeys that we want to offer to a patient and figure out which are the ones that are delivering better experiences, and that could be measured by HCAHPS or Net Promoter Score or loyalty or retention, whatever the driver is you're looking for, and using the data that we're capturing in those journeys to identify which are the journeys that are making a difference, that's very powerful. Many health systems today don't really know at a data level what are the things that patients really want from their journeys, what are the things that are resonating with them, What are the things that are causing high sentiment, positive sentiment, which are the ones that are causing dips? And once you've figured them out, changing them and going into the underlying processes to make it even more compelling.
So in your engagements with different healthcare systems, what are you finding are those points, those metrics that we should be shooting for?
Well, not surprisingly, patients are telling us that they, the facilities and the private rooms and the sort of amenities are important, but they're not the things that resonate the most. Patients want to be what we call known, valued, and heard as they go through their healthcare journey. They want to be able to have an experience that's sort of somewhat personalized to them. They, at moments of transition, they don't want to have to repeat the same information. If we've captured information about a patient, their story, their anxiety, their concerns, their preferences, we want to be able to capture that once and share that with all the caregivers that are involved in that patient's care. And so clearly these transition points have been a moment of challenge for a lot of patients because they felt like they're repeating the same information and they're not got continuity as they go through that journey.
It's a very basic human need to not feel like a stranger, either within a particular care journey, or if you have to go back or have a family member that has to go back and experience a clinical journey. And so this opportunity, this is a relationship business, we're in a relationship industry, and this opportunity to connect with the patients and ensure that that knowledge of that individual as a human being flows throughout the operations, and it gets it influences the conversations, the dialogue that happens with those patients along the journey. I think is a really basic expectation that a lot of patients have.
So what are the solutions once you figure out the drivers, what patients are looking for, and the healthcare systems have seen the evidence and bought in? What are the next steps?
Well, the next steps are then to develop those experiences that are aligned to the clinical journeys and then deliver against it.
And is that mainly through training? Is it technology? Is it additional staff? How do you achieve
I
it?
think our belief is that all of those assets are important. You've got to start this from the top down, cultural, making sure that every person who's touching a patient, even those that aren't, understand the value of a great experience for that patient. Why are we delivering that? So that's a very sort of top-down cultural transformation in some cases. That's really important. So physicians and clinicians and ancillary staff are all focused on that same goal. There's a role for the technology. Huge amount of investment in electronic medical record, and that gives me a great view of you clinically, but we need an opportunity to capture information about me as a human being. So there's a gap there, I think, on the technology side that at Docent Health we're trying to solve by building some capabilities there. And then the third is a belief that perhaps there's an opportunity for a new service model that works alongside the clinical teams, delivering a service to the patient as they go through that journey. And not just in an inpatient setting. And patients don't think about an inpatient-only event, they think about a healthcare journey. And that, for a mother, for example, 8 months, of which the inpatient stay might be 2 or 3 days. So there's lots of opportunities for us to engage with a patient longitudinally, pre- and post-discharge. And that might require a different service model. It might require a different staffing model to help engage with those patients in that way.
It sounds pretty intense from a financial perspective. Is this viable? How do you pitch this to a CFO?
So, I think there are a few variables here. There are a lot of organizations that have bet heavily on this opportunity to manage populations at risk, and there are lots of activities that you'd like to pull off from a population health perspective. I might argue that none of those are really going to be impactful if that patient isn't having a positive experience and they're connected to the organization. And so in many ways, the investments in experience will help optimize a lot of the population health relationship building activities and investments that are going on at the organization. There are many other organizations that, frankly, and putting my CFO hat on here, that believe that experience is the lever to grow, that they can create a destination environment by dint of the experience that they're able to consistently provide both patients within their local catchment area as well as patients who increasingly might want to shop around a little bit more.
I think there's just to add to that, Craig, I think there's an opportunity here for the most progressive health systems to think about building a relationship with patients in ways they've not thought about historically. It's been, in some cases, very captive market. Now, I think health systems have to develop a new set of skills about how to build a relationship with a patient. How do they create loyalty? How do they create stickiness with their patients? Because those patients have a lot more choice than they've ever had before. And I think experience is alongside a great clinical outcome. You can't trade one off against the other, but experience is one of the ways that almost, I would argue, the final frontier for a lot of health systems to find a way to engage patients in a compelling way. Create loyalty, create retention, and over time, create referrals from a growth dimension.
So healthcare systems that focus on patient experience, patient engagement, must they inevitably play the long game? Is there no short-term payoff? It's long-term?
No, I think there's lots of short-term payoff, both from the experience you're offering patients immediately, who they'll feel it immediately.
Right.
The experience that by offering a great journey for a patient actually has a reflected value to the staff. You know, clinicians, physicians, nurses have joined healthcare, been in healthcare to deliver a great experience for the patients, and some of them over time have been a bit disenfranchised because they haven't been able to provide them enough time or personalization. Now there's an opportunity to reinvigorate that staff group that is happening immediately. So I think there's lots of payoff in the short term as well as long term.
What are some of the most shocking bits of information that your research has turned up as it relates perhaps to social determinants of health, to community health needs, to dissatisfiers or satisfiers among your patient populations? Some that would shock us.
I don't know about the shock value. I think what's motivating or animating for us is when you're able to initiate a relationship with, in this instance, a first-time mother who has a fair amount of trepidation about the journey. She might not feel that she has all the support either at home or in her community. There's a lot of anxiety there. And to have someone who, frankly, is hospitality trained, to pick up the phone and call her and just listen and learn more about her. What's inspiring is just how much she's willing to share. And this is meaningful information. It's a rich narrative about who she is as a human being, but it also has direct consequences on the clinical journey that we need to execute for her. The potential complications that she might have, the logistics. Does she have a car? Can she get to a hospital tour, a prenatal education? There are a lot of these influences about her as a human being that we're able to identify, not because we're introducing ourselves as sort of a clinical engineer trying to solve her problem, but we want to create a relationship and make her feel supported.
And it's not shocking, I don't think, for those that have been in healthcare for a long time. It is shocking for people from outside of the industry to look at how the smallest things can make a big difference. You think about when a patient leaves the hospital, just think about the words we use. We discharge our patients. Is that a term that we use to think about a long-standing, continuing relationship?
It's certainly not.
Nope. Do we really fixate on that moment when they're leaving the hospital as a moment of opportunity to make sure that the patient's leaving in a really, enriched state with positive feelings about their journey? Probably not.
Often not, yeah.
One of our customers, we found there was a great opportunity for us to engage with the patients as they were being discharged, walking them outside the hospital, walking them to their car, putting their car seat into the child baby seat into the car, making sure that they're comfortable with getting their child in there, calming the father down. These moments, which might seem trivial, resonate to a patient when you talk to them afterwards. Less so about my room, my facility. It's those little small human touches that are things that are powerful, that today are not being delivered systemically.
And they, as many good ideas do, they sound obvious.
Right.
So well, yeah, of course you would do that.
Right.
So is a lot of it just training people to return the humanism, to act like a human again?
Disney, who is an often quoted company who excels in delivering great experience, they have this quote which goes something along the lines of, people think it's magic. It is not magic. It is a systemized set of processes and data, but to the customer it looks magic.
Yeah.
It's a similar sort of, I think, metaphor for healthcare, that what we've got to do is create routine, what we've got to create systems, we've got to create steps, and these are the things that we should deliver in the journey. Then it becomes standard. And then it looks like it's magic to the patient.
So if you fast forward 5-10 years, regardless of where Docent Health ends up and who you partner with, where should healthcare be? If we can properly nail this patient experience, what'll it look like then in, say, 10 years?
Want me to start? So It's a really fascinating question. What comes to mind is that as an industry, a lot of healthcare providers, any company who's here at HIMSS, has a brand that they've communicated out to the market that has elements of compassion, elements of caretaking. There's empathy, and I think in 5 and 10 years it would be a success if the actual experience that happens catches up with the signal that we're trying to send to the market.
Interesting.
And why we would want a patient to choose to go to our healthcare organization, what the expectation that we're sending them in our brand is actually what they get when they come to one of our hospitals or to one of our clinics.
That's a great way to put it. Okay. Paul, anything to add?
Yeah, I would add that if I think about myself as a healthcare consumer today, I feel woefully unsupported when I'm in a wellness phase, or when I'm in an acute need of hospital or healthcare services. I don't feel like I've got a resource available to me today. I don't think it's necessarily there from my primary care physician. I don't think it's there from my local health system. I don't think it's there from the payer. The opportunity, I think, for health systems, and one could argue the payer as well, is to create an always-on relationship with a patient, where there is a resource available to them when they're well, which might be around how to keep being well and keep being healthy, or when I'm in need of services. And that's one that's a trusted relationship that I know will be there for me. That'd be great to see in 3 or 5 years, that there's a resource available for me in both of those dimensions, one that I trust and believe and that has got my loyalty.
What makes you most optimistic about healthcare right now, about where the healthcare industry is going?
Well, I think organizations like Intermountain Healthcare and others are showing the way here, that they're not only just talking about this set of issues that we've been talking about today, but they're making investments in this. They're understanding how they're trying to have the patient's voice represented here, and many health systems moving not from and to, but getting the voice of the patient alongside the voice of the physician and the clinician, and merging those today to create a compelling experience. So they're making real investments in this culturally and in other ways.
Yeah, I'm encouraged by the insights that are coming from leaders who have come from other industries and have created experiences that truly do have the customer at the center and have consistently delivered on that. There's a massive translation that has to happen to healthcare and just the nuances and idiosyncrasies of the industry that we're in. But I think that is very valuable insight and IP that healthcare can extract and bring into to power some of the patient-centric or customer-centric ambitions that healthcare systems have.